Welcome to the Quasi Show. This is Marianne, or call me Mazza, and hello, Mary.
Hi there, Marianne. Hi, everybody. It's great to be back, and today we're going to discuss legacy.
Legacy. It's almost like the meaning of life, isn't it? Why we're here. I'm going to get really creative with this today, Mary, because a lot of people think legacy is about, men have a legacy. They go out, they work, they leave behind their legacy, or
and women tend to, if you've been fortunate to become a mum, you might think of legacy in terms of your children. But my question on this is that really your legacy? What is your legacy? What does it mean to you, and why does it matter? How about those for some good starting questions?
Yeah, great point. And so I guess the solution to this is to really support people that we discussed earlier in a few meetings together about how a lot of people, when they get to sort of the children leaving home and maybe they're, between sort of 48 and 55 is the highest sort of divorce rate. And it's like, some people just give up, Mary.
Yeah.
And buy a dog and drink wine every night.
So you've hit some key points there, Marianne, because that's some of the things I experienced recently as all my children have grown up and left home. Not so much that I hit the bottle, but certainly the dogs could become the focus of my life. And so I started thinking, well, what is this all about? What would I want to be remembered for? And then I noticed that I've got a couple of pretty active brothers in the business world, and I noticed that they are working on their legacy. Legacy matters to them. And as I researched it, and we might want to discuss a whole bunch of this stuff because it really starts to unravel, I discovered why legacy is really important. And perhaps if in our later years, in our 40s and 50s, we were really asking ourselves, what do I want to be remembered for? We might be surprised at what the answers are.
I really challenge you on that, Mary, because in my recent research,
battle of research.
Yes, I was speaking to a really great friend of mine, Stephen Bettles, who's a quantum physicist. And of course, our language in speaking is all about creation, evolution. What are we here for? He teaches me a lot about quantum physics and how energy works and so forth. So from up-leveling from the human race, and we look at it from even a spiritual viewpoint,
sure,
why are we here? And if we ask ourselves, well, what's my legacy? What do I want to be remembered for? We were discussing that the other day, that's really about the ego, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So the ego can be a driver. And then what if you go a bit deeper though? What if you're saying that everybody has a legacy? It's either accidental or intentional. We all leave behind ripples across time, across generations. And then how does that look with what your, professor of quantum physics? How might that look if we go beyond ego?
Yeah, it's more about, it depends, I guess, what you believe from that viewpoint. We're all a part of a collective consciousness. And so, when we pass over, it all depends on what you believe about that, really. So we speak to this legacy idea from a viewpoint of the here and now, and perhaps not get too far out there. Might be helpful to help people sort of perhaps look at what are they creating, and is life about, what is the meaning of this life, and how are they creating, who are they being? And maybe we should just let the audience have a bit of a breath and take a quick break, and we'll come back and start unpacking all that. That's great. That's juicy, Mary. That's juicy. Okay, back in a moment. Welcome back. Welcome back, Mary.
Welcome back. Hey, thanks, Marianne.
Yeah, so let's
All
get
right.
into this.
Yeah, we touched on a few things, and one thing really important that you mentioned right there was how about we deal with this in the here and now, so it makes it a bit more manageable for everybody.
Yeah. And interesting how you mentioned about you have children, your children have flown the coop, and how
Yeah.
different it is for me having never had children, and how women who choose not to have children these days, and there are a lot of couples out there choosing not to have children to contribute more to what's actually going on in the here and now, and the freedom that can bring for choices. And so, shall we talk a bit about that, Mary?
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot in there, because motherhood for some is quite an integral part of your life, and then all of a sudden it's over because those kids grow up a lot quicker than you realise.
And fatherhood,
And
fatherhood. Don't leave the men out.
oh yes, fatherhood.
Yeah, they have
So
a part in this.
parenting, yeah, absolutely. Parenting, and the empty nest syndrome is a time where you retake or take stock of your life. And isn't it interesting, Marianne, how when I started talking about legacy, and you and I crossed paths because we were both asking ourselves a very similar question. You without children, and looking at the time that you've spent in researching and developing, and other people, and all that energy you've put into your personal development and professional life. And my focus was on kids, and as well as a professional life, but certainly it was kids first. And here we are, both with some big questions about legacy, life meaning, and how it all dovetails.
Yeah. It's certainly interesting time. And what I notice, there's a big community out there of unhappy people that. So let's say that the male goes for the legacy. You know, he wants a prodigal son, and he wants to build this empire, or he wants to work his guts out all his life and leave all this money and make sure everyone's taken care of. And, what's his legacy? He was a good, solid man in the community, and he contributed to this, that, and the other. I mean, that's a viewpoint of legacy.
That is a viewpoint of legacy. That's quite a traditional one. That's what you hear at someone's funeral. What a great achievement, the list of achievements, and usually some points about their characteristics and who they are and what they stood for. Yep,
Yeah. And then it's quite interesting about the gender separation around legacy, because I don't often hear of women having one.
No. So what you'll hear when, and it sounds terrible to talk about it in this context, isn't it? But I guess this is where we notice that we all attend funerals, and we hear the eulogies being given, and often you can quite see the contrast between how men are spoken about in terms of legacy and women, and it's often referred to as their children, or their how well they baked or raised a. And it sounds terrible because we're in a new generation and women are out there kicking goals and achieving in the workforce, but we will still think of children perhaps as a legacy.
Yeah, well, I hope we can agree to well, I hope that that we can make an impact on offering people today a different viewpoint on looking at their life and what does that mean, because at the end of the day, if everyone just lightened up and we're here to explore and create, and if that was their only I guess I don't know if that was their only intention. I'm just here to create and explore and have fun, right?
Yeah.
Imagine operating life through that perception, opposed to I must follow this tradition of getting married, having 2.5 kids, working my guts out, looking good in society, stacking up with the masses and measuring myself against the comparison of everybody else's wealth.
Absolutely, and that is exactly where this concept of what do I want to be remembered as, or who do I want to be remembered as, and what do I want to be remembered for, I refer to those as disrupting questions. I don't want you to anybody to actually pop out with an answer like I want to be remembered for the tower that I built or the bridge that I built, but yes, to be remembered for your intentions to explore, to create, to have fun, and use that questioning process as a way of opening up ideas inside your thought process.
Yeah.
And then begin to see what you're really made of, what really drives you.
Yeah. Yeah, and it really comes from also, as we've discussed in the past, Mary, you being a values specialist. You know, what are your values? But they're also, I'm noticing, are really fluid as well. And if I put my attention on my top 4 values, and then I start really practicing working with my values, I notice I grow through them, and then I create new values. And a lot of people can be very rigid about lifetime core values and say, well, I'm honest, I'm dot, 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 dot. And it's like,
Yep.
well, are you really?
Yeah. Your values do shift. That's certainly one key to them. And the other part of values is that you can choose. You get to choose what is a priority value for you. And I know for you, Marianne, you've talked recently that freedom was a top priority value, and that has indeed shifted. And I think you were moving towards liberation the other day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Marching towards liberation.
Yeah. So, but it's why you have your, like, freedom for me was all about the opposite of feeling trapped or, you know, blocked in some way. So it was about freedom. My value was demonstrating freedom of expression, freedom to love, freedom to be me, freedom to be authentic, and all of these things. When I mastered those, so now to liberate myself and others, which is really what I do as a coach. I help liberate people from their success blocks and find a way to feel free within themselves, recognizing that liberation and all of these things are an inside job, that they're nothing to do with the material world.
So one of the really important things that you just touched on there, Marianne, was that you defined what your value of freedom meant for you. And that's actually one of the key components of doing a values process with anybody, or just taking yourself through a values process. What does it mean for you? If freedom means, is it financial freedom? Is it freedom of choice? Is it whatever it might be? You could have 2 people who have valued duty, but their definition and their expression of that value, and I'll use that term again, the expression of that value can be extremely different. So they might be united on, yes, we both value duty. One person might believe that's duty to country or a cause. Another person might believe that's duty to family or responsibility. So how that plays out can actually result in conflict, even though they have the same value.
Yeah,
About that.
absolutely. Well done. Cha-ching, ching. And it also shows that you can have conflicting values within your, you know, like I've found that in the past too. That
Right. In your own value framework.
Yes. Like,
Yeah.
you know, and yeah. So how that really ties in for me with when I look at legacy. You know, or purpose or meaning or beliefs, it all ties into this ingredients of how I'm showing up in the world.
Yeah, you're spot on. And that's where legacy is created. I call that a legacy space. And if your values of freedom are in line with what you're doing and and your behavior, you will be showing up in the world. You will be honoring your authentic self. And from that authentic self, that is where legacies are created.
Yeah, good.
Or impact, if you want to move, like, legacy is such a big word, and it can be quite frightening, and yes, it does feed into the idea of ego, of being remembered for something. But legacy might just be your impact, how you impact your world around you and how you impact future generations. Legacy as a dictionary definition will give you something along those lines.
Yeah. It's quite exciting, isn't it, Mary? So, yeah, it's like, it's almost like a little bit nerve-wracking when you look at it. It's like, wow, like if we could sort of look at, I'm that powerful that I can make a choice to create in this moment, because we grow and we change, hopefully, those people that are waking up and living a conscious life. What I mean by that is that they have they understand they're far more than blood and bone, like they actually are a valuable part of humanity. And so I guess it's quite exciting when you stand in your power and you follow your nose, as my dear dad used to say. Follow your nose, Mary Lou. You always used to call me Mary Lou. Follow your nose. And when you have an emotional map, and when you have a moral compass,
Yep.
that you're refining all the time, and I think that's the real emotional juice in that. You're really refining it. You want to refine it. You just
it's a dynamic, isn't it? It's not a static state. It's always going to evolve. Something is going to shift and change.
Yes, and I think what bothers me and in conflict with my freedom value is when I come up against people that have rigid rules and they have actually no awareness of the depth of meaning in a word or an action that comes out of a word. Like I was discussing with a friend the other day about discernment, and there's people that meditate on that word for a month to define what does discernment mean for them and how they can bring that into their life and work with it in order to create healthy boundaries, for example. And I just love the expansion of people's willingness to actually look at life as a canvas of creative explosion or exploration that they can actually mold and play with and feel and create aliveness. And I guess for me, the reason I was so excited in talking to you from the get-go about this subject was I see and coach so many women and men that are struggling in their 40s, 50s and so on, that are losing their way or giving up in some way or seeking somebody else outside of themselves to be their source of happiness, when they have such a powerful ability that is untapped, that I help them with, to tap into the essence of who they truly are and discover who they truly are and what they're capable of. And that's really exciting to me.
Yeah, well, gosh, you covered a whole lot of things there, didn't you?
We need to take a breath, don't we?
I think we need to take a breath, and we'll be right back. Okay. We'll be right back.
Okay, bye. Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Hi, Mary.
Okay. Hi. So, Marianne, you covered a whole bunch of things. So we just, right now, I'd like to look for what you and I both find in common about this whole discussion around legacy and ego, values. What is it that we both want to help people find?
Yeah, for me, it's really about that, to get that spark in your ass, like what gets you, what drives you, what gets you out of bed in the morning. But there's so many people that are in the Groundhog Day, and they're doing the same sort of thing. And I know for myself that the only absolute my favorite word is juice, right? Because that real juice
Yeah.
and essence of who you are comes from within. And I remember even, I mean, travel is fantastic, but I remember when I was in my late 20s and I was traveling all over the place, and then right into my 30s, I just traveled, and whether it be business or whatever, and I was searching outside myself. I was always looking for something, and I searched and I went from all sorts of corners of the globe. And if somebody had stopped me and said, "What is it you're looking for, Marianne?" I would have gone, "Huh?" And sort of gone, I don't know. And as I started my spiritual practice, or my search inside myself, sort of program of self-mastery, I guess, in a way, which, you never master. You're always creating. And when I really started looking at my values, beliefs, and things like that in my very early 30s, something started to shift, where I recognized, wow, it's actually not out there. The connection that I'm seeking, and that value of energy that I'm seeking, is actually in here. And we do have certain places and people that spark and ignite us.
Yep.
And that's great. It's really valuable to have lots of these wonderful connections, and to explore the world. It's really valuable to do that. But it's also more, for me, what I'm offering people to understand is, the more mindful we are, if you're seeking happiness outside of yourself, and then when that person or that framework of happiness sort of falls away, like your children will leave the nest, and you're left feeling empty, or you're left feeling depressed, then that's when you know that it's important to look not out there anymore. Something's got to shift,
Yeah. So yes, both our commonalities in this, and I do have a little giggle about you talking about searching the world, and then when one of my earliest memories of you is telling me that I'm no longer a searcher, I can now explore, and I like that stayed with me immediately. So to even think that at that stage you were possibly still searching has tickled me. But yes, when there is transition, any type of transition in life, and the things that were there and were part of your identity and who you were, when they are gone, be it your children, or be it your relationship, or your job, or your parents, if you lose parents, all those things can often create a void. And if we aren't prepared to go inside, we certainly will look externally at things that will keep the ego happy. And by asking our questions of what drives us, or what is my legacy, or why does it matter, by really getting deep down with that, you can find a peace of mind that you've never found before. And along with that peace of mind comes a natural drive. The spark in your ass it's there every day when you wake up. And I know that you're very good at helping people find the spark, Marianne.
Yeah, I think it's really valuable what you just said then. It needs to be honoured, Mary, because that piece around the peace of mind is so important. I mean, even though we'll all grieve when we lose people, or we go through a transition, even from job to job, or we lose our parents. And I know when my parents passed, I felt like an adult orphan. Apparently it's a thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like, wow. And then you shift again, and you grow again. And one thing that I could add about legacy, if I look at what my parents left as a legacy for me, it's almost like, whatever you haven't dealt with, it'll deal to you when you go through grief, right? So let's say that you had a really insecure childhood, and then you go and get married and you have your babies and they grow up, and then say you lose your husband or something. you'll go back to those insecurities that weren't mended in the first place. And so all this fear and doubt and worry will come up. And so it was quite interesting. I had a different perspective on each parent when they passed and what I was left to deal with on an emotional standpoint. And so both parents actually in the higher realm of my awareness offered me two very valuable pieces. My mother sort of taught me through her experiences that I witnessed to really value myself when she passed. That was the legacy she left me. And when my dad passed, there was a sense of insecurity because he was my dad, my best mate, so I had to deal and understand that security was an inside job. And I never even knew I had the wobbles until he died. Do you know what I mean? So people can leave a really soft but significantly powerful legacy for you to evolve to another place or transform into another part.
And if you consider how powerful a legacy can be when people aren't conscious or haven't considered what their legacy is, so that happens naturally. So people have left a natural, or I've called it an accidental legacy. How amazing could a legacy be if you were choosing, if you were deciding, if you were searching inside yourself for the best possible authentic you each and every day? What kind of impact might that leave?
Oh, I love you. I love hearing that. That is just
that's what it's about.
That is the core of life. That is like, wow. You know, we don't even realize the impact that we have on others, our behavior, our actions, our feelings, how we're showing up, and to be conscious of it and say, how am I, it's a ripple effect, isn't it? Like the butterflies,
ripple effect.
You sneeze here and a door slams in LA, it's all, we're all connected in some big matrix. But the point is that, like how often do we sit there and say, oh my God, remember such and such, and she was amazing, she taught me, blah, blah, blah. And that person wouldn't even know.
Wouldn't even know. And yet, how amazing. And that's where ego leaves the conversation. Ego is not part of this conversation because that person might not even know.
Well, it's all about the materialistic world coming from legacy with ego.
Yeah.
It's about empire building. It's about security from that materialistic point of view, maybe.
Yeah.
But we're talking about what
we're talking about the inner, the impact, why it really matters, what really matters, and how you can leave a lasting legacy that transcends generations.
Yes, and what about those beautiful legacies where people say, no matter what happened, I can say that about my dear dad. I know in my heart how much he loved me, and what a beautiful legacy,
That's beautiful. And maybe that's a good spot to take another little break, and we can come back with a wrap up.
And a bit of solutions about how people can tune into even the first steps of this, Mary, because I think this is going to be a really ongoing podcast. And then we're even going to do a big course on it, aren't we? Okay, back in 1 moment. Hi, welcome back.
Welcome back. Hi, Marianne. Seems like 2 seconds ago I was speaking with you.
Yeah, well, it was actually. So let's look at some really valuable questions that we can allow people to explore. And when I always encourage people, when I put a question out, I call it a self-inquiry prompt. And I really encourage people to just pick up a pen and journal it for a couple of minutes and see what comes up for them. And a great question, I guess, to start with about legacy is, maybe what you tapped into, Mary, would be
who do you want to be remembered as?
Yeah, well, that's writing your eulogy, isn't it? Kind of. That's great, but I would say what gives me peace of mind is.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So what gives me peace of mind is, and then you would be able to look in the big cosmic mirror and go, well, what aren't I doing? What am I doing? What do I need to do? You know, this is
Yeah, so these are what I call just disrupting questions. I realize that disruption is used in this world of Uber and new technology. However, it can be used in our own lives, and entrepreneurs that want to create or recreate the existing wheel ask themselves, how can I do this better, differently? And they come up with an answer like Uber. And in our personal lives, we can ask ourselves, how do I want to do this differently? And see
yeah.
what pops out.
If I could do it differently,
Yeah.
what would I do?
Yeah, if I could do it differently, what would I do? That's great. And that's a disrupting question.
Yeah, and I
And,
guess
and,
that,
the, and, the, and the brain, just as you know, with your research, Marianne, you know what the brain does. It just starts answering that question.
yeah,
You
well,
don't have to know
the
the
mind goes
answer.
sorting. It goes to
Yes.
sorting out. Well, hang on a minute. So as soon as you ask yourself a question, how do I feel right now? How do I feel about this whole legacy conversation with these two Kiwi chicks that were born in New Zealand, but their grandmothers lived in Australia. That's why they call themselves quasis. I don't even know if we've ever explained that, Mary. But we both
Oh,
live in Australia, so
yeah. And yes, so we're Kiwi Aussies. And but we born and raised in New Zealand and exported ourselves to Australia.
but our grandmothers were both born here, which is quite interesting, isn't it?
It is. It feeds into the whole
Well,
legacy.
that was a legacy for me because my grandma, she was
Hmm.
born in Broken Hill, right? Long flaming red hair, just an unbelievably powerful, strong woman. And yeah, so I use that legacy story all the time. If anyone gives me a hard time that you're a Kiwi, well, no, actually, I'm more Australian than you, probably.
Well, that's quite right. I've used the same thing. So my grandmother was born in Fitzroy, and um, and here I am back in Melbourne. So it is interesting what the legacy is of our grandparents have left, and that also leads to another discussion that we can carry on the next podcast as well about.
Yeah, and did you notice how we both defended ourselves through legacy? Used our legacy as a defence.
Yes, it's okay that we live here. We really are Australian.
Yeah.
So isn't
Yeah.
that funny how both of us, we just talked about questions and our brains popped up with a whole lot of interesting responses. And that might happen to our audience as well. You might not know where your thought process has taken you, and you don't necessarily have to know. The idea of asking a clarifying question or a disrupting question is to shake the monkeys in the tree a little bit and see what
Yeah.
falls out.
And a really great question is, if I didn't look at legacy as in the material world, what would my legacy be? Wow.
Wow. Yeah, nice.
That cuts out 98% of the planet.
So, Marianne, we have some additional plans, don't we, as to what
Yes.
we're going to do with
We're going
this?
to
And
talk about different parts of life in this podcast over the coming weeks, and hopefully we're going to put together a workshop on this, an intro workshop first of all, isn't it, Mary?
yeah, intro workshop just to kind of
Probably,
unpack what
yeah.
legacy means and help people understand their unique definition of legacy.
Yeah, but more so too is this is really to energize people to really find a purpose path, feeling a thread of enthusiasm and positive energy to
Yeah.
follow, so that they are inspired and creative in their life. Yeah.
Yeah, look, well done you, Marianne, on pointing out the benefits. I always take them for granted, but these can't be taken for granted. These are really life-changing ideas and concepts that we will present to people in a workshop that
Yeah.
will really provide sustainable inspiration.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right, my darling girl. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. And if you want any
Okay.
one-on-one support before we get our workshop stuff happening around September, October, just reach out. Our links are always below. And yeah, we'll be back next
Yeah.
week. See
Thanks,
you.
Marianne. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.